there is a room. Maybe you have been in this room. Maybe you are in it right now in some form, a meeting, a negotiation, a dinner, a conversation where the stakes are higher than the casual surface of the exchange suggests. The room is full of people, intelligent people, accomplished people, people with opinions and agendas and carefully prepared positions, people who are ready to speak, eager to be heard, armed with arguments and evidence, and the particular energy of someone who has decided in advance what they want the outcome to be. And then there is one person who is not doing any of that. They are still. Not the stillness of someone who has nothing to say. Not the stillness of someone who is lost or intimidated or waiting for permission. But a different kind of stillness entirely. The stillness of someone who has made a deliberate and disciplined choice to observe before they engage, to understand before they speak, to let the room reveal itself completely before they decide how to move within it. Watch this person. Watch how their eyes move, not restlessly, not anxiously, but with a quiet and systematic attention that takes in everything. The body language of the person at the head of the table, the micro expressions that flicker across faces when certain topics are raised, the alliances and tensions that reveal themselves in who looks at whom and who carefully avoids looking at whom, the unspoken dynamics that govern every room but that only the truly observant ever learn to read. This person is building a map while everyone else is performing. This person is understanding while everyone else is competing to be heard. This person is learning what needs to be said while everyone else is spending their social capital on the first impression. This person is gathering the intelligence that will make their eventual contribution not just heard, but felt. Not just noted, but remembered. Not just acknowledged, but acted upon. This is the most dangerous person in the room. Not dangerous in the sense of threat, not dangerous in the sense of manipulation or malice or hidden agenda. Dangerous in the sense that when they finally speak, when that stillness breaks and the words arrive, something in the room shifts. Attention moves toward them with a kind of inevitability. People lean in. The noise settles because a single idea of the person who is ready communicated before a single word that what is coming is worth hearing. Dale Carnegie spent decades studying this person. He encountered them in boardrooms and classrooms and social gatherings and private conversations. He recognized them always by the same quality, that particular, disciplined, almost meditative stillness in the midst of social noise. And he understood something about them that most people, even the most socially intelligent, never fully grasp. Their power was not in what they said. It was in everything they had absorbed before they said it. Carnegie believed, at the deepest level of his philosophy, that the greatest communicators in human history were not primarily great talkers. They were great understanders, people who had developed through years of conscious practice and genuine curiosity the rare and extraordinary ability to enter any human situation and read it, truly read it beneath the surface, beneath the stated positions and the performed emotions, before they responded to it. He called this the master's skill, not eloquence, not wit, not the ability to construct a compelling argument or deliver a memorable line or command a room with the force of personality. The master's skill was understanding, deep, patient, disciplined understanding of the human beings in front of you and the invisible forces shaping their behavior. And the gateway to that understanding, the first and most essential step, was the willingness to be silent long enough to actually achieve it. Most people are not willing. Most people experience silence as a vacuum that must be filled, as a social vulnerability that exposes them to judgment, as an admission that they do not have enough to say, enough to contribute, enough to justify their presence in the room. And so they fill it, immediately, instinctively, often with words that would have been far more powerful if they had arrived later, after the room had been fully understood rather than partially glimpsed. Carnegie watched this happen constantly, and he identified it as one of the most common and most costly mistakes in human communication. Not the mistake of saying the wrong thing, but the mistake of speaking before you understand enough to say the right thing. While everyone else was competing to be heard, the most dangerous person in the room was quietly learning everything they needed to know. To understand where this principle comes from, why silence before speech is not passivity, but the highest form of social intelligence, you have to understand something about the way most people listen, or rather, the way most people do not. Carnegie made an observation early in his teaching career that stayed with him for the rest of his life. He was running one of his communication courses in New York, a room full of professionals, educated, ambitious, articulate people who had come specifically to improve the way they connected with others. He asked them to do something simple. He asked them to listen, to sit in a conversation with a partner and do nothing except listen. No planning their response, no waiting for their turn, no evaluating or judging or mentally preparing a counter argument, just listening fully, completely, with every available unit of attention directed outward rather than inward. Most of them could not do it, not because they lacked intelligence, not because they lacked the desire, but because genuine listening, the deep, undivided, fully present kind, is one of the most cognitively demanding things a human being can do. And most people have never been taught how, have never been shown what it actually feels like. I've spent so many years in a culture that rewards speaking over listening, performing over absorbing, that the muscle of genuine attention has never been properly developed. Carnegie watched his students struggle with this exercise and understood something important. The inability to listen was not just a communication problem, it was a perception problem, a fundamental limitation on how much of any given situation a person could actually see and understand. Because here is what happens when you are not truly listening. You are not receiving the full signal. You are receiving a fraction of what the other person is communicating. The surface layer, the literal content of the words, while missing the vast and infinitely more revealing world beneath. The hesitations, the word choices, the things that are almost said and then pulled back, the emotional texture that runs beneath the logical structure of what someone is telling you, the fear disguised as confidence, the uncertainty disguised as certainty, the need disguised as demand. All of this is visible to the person who has learned to truly listen. All of it is invisible to the person who is merely waiting for their turn to speak. Carnegie drew on the example of Sigmund Freud, whose therapeutic method was built entirely on the power of deep listening. Freud's patients described the experience of being in his presence as unlike anything they had encountered anywhere else in their lives. Not because Freud was charming or entertaining or impressive in the conventional sense, but because a word per idea finally lands in that mind of idea of his attention as a physical thing, a warmth, a focused, undivided, completely non-judgmental presence that made you feel, perhaps for the first time, that every word you were saying mattered, that every thought you were expressing was worth the air it took to form it. And in that feeling, in that rare and extraordinary experience of being truly heard, people revealed things they had never revealed to anyone, said things they had not known they needed to say, understood things about themselves they had never been able to access before. The listening created the truth, not the other way around. Carnegie took this insight out of the therapeutic context and applied it to every domain of human interaction. To business negotiations, to sales conversations, to leadership, to marriage, to friendship, to the thousand ordinary daily encounters that most people navigate on autopilot. He understood that the person who listens deeply in any of these contexts gains something that no amount of preparation or cleverness or persuasive skill can manufacture. They gain the truth of the situation, not the performed version, not the strategic presentation, not the carefully curated version of reality that most people offer to most other people in most social situations. The real version, the version that only emerges when a person feels safe enough, heard enough, valued enough to stop performing and start actually communicating. And once you have the truth of a situation, once you understand what is really happening beneath the surface of what is being said, your ability to respond effectively, to connect genuinely, to influence meaningfully, becomes something that people who never learn to listen cannot even comprehend. This is what Carnegie meant by the master skill. This is why he returned to it again and again across everything he wrote and taught. Not because listening is passive, but because it is the most active and most powerful thing you can do in any human encounter. He told the story of a man named Isaac F. Marcosson, a celebrated journalist who had interviewed some of the most powerful and famous people in the world: kings, presidents, generals, artists, scientists, people who were interviewed constantly by skilled and experienced professionals and who had developed over years of public life the particular art of saying exactly what they wanted to say and nothing more. And yet Marcusson had a reputation, remarkable, almost legendary among his peers, for getting people to say things they had never said to anyone else, for drawing out revelations that no other journalist could reach. His method? He listened with complete attention before he asked a single question. He let the person settle. Let them feel the quality of his presence. Let them understand, through the simple and unmistakable signal of his undivided attention, that he was not there to perform an interview. He was there to understand. And people responded to that, universally, across cultures and languages and levels of fame and power and public godliness. Because the hunger to be truly heard is not a weakness of the insecure. It is a fundamental human need, one that is so rarely met, so consistently starved in the noise and speed of modern life, that when someone actually offers it genuinely, fully, without agenda, the response is almost involuntary. People open, people trust, people say the true thing instead of the safe thing. And the person who created that opening, the person who listened first, deeply, and without agenda, now holds something more valuable than any argument or strategy or persuasive technique could ever manufacture. They hold the key to the room. The person who listens first and deepest does not just hear what is said, they discover what is real, and that changes everything. There is a quality that the greatest observers of human nature, Carnegie, Franklin, Lincoln, the Stoics, the most effective diplomats and negotiators and leaders in history, all possessed in varying degrees and described in varying ways. But it points to the same thing: the ability to read a room. Not in the superficial sense that phrase is often used. Not simply the social awareness to know when a joke has landed badly, or when a meeting has run too long, but in the deeper, more demanding, more consequential sense. The ability to walk into any human situation and understand, within minutes, what is actually happening, what people actually want, what they are actually afraid of, what invisible forces are shaping the behavior of every person in the space, what is being said, and what is being carefully left unsaid, and why. This is not a mystical gift. It is not an innate talent distributed randomly at birth to a lucky few. It is a skill, learnable, practicable, developable through the same disciplined attention that any other complex skill requires. And Carnegie identified its foundation with characteristic precision. You cannot read a room you are performing in. This is the insight that most people never reach. The insight that separates the truly socially intelligent from the merely socially skilled. The insight that explains why some people walk into a room and immediately understand its dynamics, while others, equally intelligent, equally experienced, equally well-intentioned, remain blind to what is happening around them no matter how long they are in the space. The difference is not intelligence, it is attention direction. The person who is performing, who is managing their impression, monitoring how they are coming across, planning their next contribution, anxiously tracking the reactions of others to everything they say, has their attention directed inward, toward themselves, toward the management of their own image and the protection of their own ego. And an inward directed attention, no matter how sharp or sophisticated, cannot read what is happening outward. But the person who has stepped out of the performance, who has made the deliberate and disciplined choice to direct their full attention outward, toward the room, toward the people, toward the invisible currents of emotion and motivation and history that flow beneath every human gathering. This person sees everything. Carnegie illustrated this with one of the most remarkable figures in American diplomatic history, Benjamin Disraeli, Prime Minister of Britain, one of the most skilled political operators of the 19th century, a man who navigated the extraordinarily complex and treacherous social landscape of Victorian politics with a mastery that his contemporaries found almost supernatural. His secret, according to everyone who studied him closely, was deceptively simple. He never walked into a room trying to be the most impressive person in it. He walked in trying to understand it. He would arrive at a dinner, a reception, a political gathering, places where every other ambitious person in attendance was working the room, building alliances, displaying wit, competing for the attention of the powerful. And he would do something that looked, to a casual observer, like almost nothing. He would watch, he would listen, he would ask quiet questions and then be genuinely completely silent for the answers. He would observe the dynamics between people. He would notice who deferred to whom and who avoided whom, and who was performing confidence they did not quite feel, and who was carrying a concern they had not yet found the right moment to express. And then, when he spoke, when the stillness finally broke, it was with a precision and a relevance and an emotional accuracy that felt, to the people in the room, almost uncanny. Because he was not responding to what people had said, he was responding to what they actually meant. Carnegie studied Disraeli and others like him and identified the specific behaviors that enabled this quality of perception. The first was physical stillness. The genuinely observant person does not fidget, does not check their phone, does not scan the room with the restless energy of someone who is uncomfortable with silence. They are physically settled, grounded, present in a way that communicates without words that they are not going anywhere and they are not missing anything. The second was the quality of their questions. When they did speak, it was often to ask rather than to tell, and the questions were not the generic conversational filler questions that most people deploy to appear interested. They were specific, pointed, questions that reviewed genuine curiosity and, more importantly, that demonstrated the questioner had already been paying close enough attention to know what to ask. This quality of question, the question that shows you have truly been listening, has an effect on people that Carnegie described as almost electric, because it is so rare, because most people's questions revealed, despite their best intentions, that they were not fully present for what came before, that they were thinking about something else, that the conversation was background noise to whatever was happening in their own head, but the question that could only have been asked by someone who is truly, completely, attentively there. That question communicates something that no statement of interest or warmth or care could ever manufacture. It communicates, I was with you. Every word, every nuance, every moment. And the person who receives that communication responds from the deepest part of themselves. They feel seen, they feel understood, they feel in the presence of this quiet and attentive person, something they may not have felt in years. They feel that their inner world is interesting enough to someone else to be worth this quality of attention. Carnegie called this the highest form of human respect, not the respect of titles or deference or formal acknowledgement, but the respect of genuine attention, the respect that says, what is happening inside you matters enough to me that I am willing to be fully present for it. And the person who offers this respect, consistently, genuinely, as a practice and a discipline rather than a performance, becomes, over time, something that no amount of charisma or wit or impressive credentials can replicate. They become the person that people seek out when something truly matters. The person that people trust with the real conversation, not just the surface one. The person that people remember not for what they said, but for how they made them feel in the moments before they said anything at all. You cannot read a room you are performing in. Only the person who steps out of the performance can see what is truly happening. There is a negotiation principle that the most effective diplomats, the most successful business leaders, and the most skilled conflict mediators in the world all know, but almost never talk about publicly. It is not taught in business schools. It is not in the standard negotiation playbook. It does not appear on the list of tactics that most people learn when they are trained to persuade, influence, or close. And yet it is the single most powerful lever available in any high-stakes human encounter. The principle is this: the person who speaks last, who has listened longest, observed most carefully, and waited with the greatest patience, almost always determines the outcome. Not the most aggressive person, not the most prepared person, not the person with the most impressive credentials or the most elaborate argument or the most forceful personality. The person who waited, who watched, who understood the room completely before they chose to move within it. Carnegie arrived at this principle not through abstract theory, but through the careful study of real encounters with real consequences. He examined negotiations that succeeded and negotiations that failed. He looked at conflicts that were resolved and conflicts that escalated beyond anyone's intention or desire. He studied conversations that transformed relationships and conversations that destroyed them. And in every case, the pattern was the same. The outcomes were determined not in the moments of maximum noise and maximum assertion, but in the moments of maximum understanding. The turning points arrive not when someone finally found the perfect argument, but when someone finally understood what the other person actually needed to hear. And you cannot know what someone needs to hear until you have listened long enough to understand what they actually need. Carnegie told the story of a labor negotiation that had reached complete deadlock. Two sides, both convinced of the righteousness of their position, both exhausted by weeks of circular argument, both hardened by the accumulated frustration of feeling unheard and misunderstood. A mediator was brought in. He did not arrive with a solution. He did not arrive with a proposal or a compromise or a clever reframing of the disputed issues. He arrived with something far simpler and far more powerful. He arrived with questions. He sat with each side separately, and he asked them to tell him everything, not just the official position, not just the stated demands, but everything, the history, the grievances that predated this particular dispute by years, the moments where trust had been broken and never repaired, the fears beneath the demands, the needs beneath the fears. And he listened, not strategically, not while planning his next move, but genuinely, completely, with the full weight of his attention directed toward understanding rather than resolving. For 2 days, he did almost nothing else. And then, on the third day, he brought the two sides together. He did not present a compromise. He did not split the difference. He did not propose a solution that gave each side half of what they had asked for. Instead, he spoke about what he had heard. He reflected back to each side what the other side actually needed, not what they had demanded, but what they had revealed in those long and honest conversations that they truly needed beneath the demand. And something remarkable happened. The room changed. Not because the facts had changed, not because the legal or financial realities had shifted, but because for the first time in weeks of deadlock, each side heard themselves described accurately by someone who had no stake in the outcome, heard their own position reflected back without distortion or agenda, and in that reflection, recognized, quietly, uncomfortably, and undeniably, the humanity of the people on the other side of the table. The negotiation was resolved within hours. Carnegie used this story to illustrate what he considered the deepest truth about human conflict. Most conflicts are not really about what they appear to be about. The argument about money is about respect. The argument about process is about trust. The argument about facts is about identity. The argument about policy is about fear. Beneath every stated position is a human need. And beneath every human need is a story. The person who can hear the story, who can listen past the stated position to the human need beneath it, and past the human need to the story that created it. This person holds a key that unlocks rooms that no argument, however brilliant, could ever open. Carnegie connected this directly to one of his most fundamental principles. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. This was not a counsel of passivity. It was not an instruction to never disagree or never assert or never push back. It was an instruction about timing, about sequence, about the order in which things must happen for genuine resolution to become possible. You cannot dissuade someone whose defenses are fully mobilized. You cannot change a mind that is entirely occupied with defending itself. You cannot reach a person who does not yet feel heard, but the person who feels heard, who has been given the extraordinary experience of having their actual position their actual need, their actual fear understood and acknowledged without judgment. This person is no longer entirely defended. They have been given something. And when you have been given something real, something genuinely valuable, the human instinct is to open rather than close, to consider rather than resist. This is the sequence Carnegie taught. Listen first, understand completely, acknowledge genuinely, and only then, only after the other person feels truly heard, speak. Because at that point, you are not speaking into resistance. You are speaking into an opening that your listening created. And the words that arrive into that opening carry a weight and a resonance that the same words spoken into a defended and unlistening room could never achieve. This is the power that belongs to the person who never speaks first, not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand something that most people never learn, that the most powerful words are not the ones spoken with the greatest force or the greatest confidence or the greatest preparation. They are the words spoken at exactly the right moment, into exactly the right opening, to a person who has been listened to deeply enough that they are finally ready to hear. And creating that moment, that opening, that readiness, requires everything that came before the words: the stillness, the observation, the patience, the deep and genuine and unhurried listening that says, without saying anything at all, I am here, I am with you, I understand you. And what I am about to say comes from that understanding. That is not a communication technique. That is a form of respect so rare and so powerful that most people encounter it only a handful of times in their entire lives. And every single time they encounter it, they remember it forever. The most powerful words are never the ones spoken with the greatest force. They are the ones spoken at exactly the right moment into an opening that listening created. We have come finally to the question that everything in this story has been building toward. Not the question of how to listen better, not the question of how to read a room more accurately, or time your words more precisely, or position yourself more strategically in a negotiation or a conversation or a conflict. Those are important questions, useful questions, questions worth spending serious time with. But they are not the final question. The final question is deeper, more personal, more demanding, and more consequential than any technique or strategy or communication principle could ever be. The question is this: why does it matter? Not why does it matter strategically, not why does it matter professionally, not why does it matter in terms of outcomes and influence and the ability to move through the world more effectively. Why does it matter as a human being, as a person, as someone navigating the brief and irreplaceable window of time you have been given to connect with other human beings before that window closes? Carnegie asked this question, not in the abstract, not as a philosophical exercise, but as a man who had spent his entire adult life in the presence of human beings in all their complexity and contradiction and beauty and struggle. A man who had watched thousands of people transform themselves through the principles he taught, and who had, in those transformations, witnessed something that no theory had quite prepared him for. He had watched people become more alive, not more successful, though that happened too, not more influential, though that followed, but more alive, more present, more genuinely connected to the world around them and the people in it, more aware of the extraordinary richness of ordinary human encounters that most people sleepwalk through without ever truly experiencing. The person who learns to truly listen does not just become a better communicator, they become a better receiver of life. They begin to notice things they had never noticed before. The particular quality of hesitation in a colleague's voice that reveals a fear they have never named. The flicker of pride in a parent's eyes when they talk about their child. The loneliness beneath the confidence of the person everyone assumes has everything together. The quiet heroism of ordinary people navigating extraordinary difficulties without fanfare or acknowledgement. All of this was always there, in every room, in every conversation, in every human encounter that most people process at the surface level and move through without stopping. But it is only visible to the person who has developed the capacity to truly pay attention. Carnegie believed his capacity was the foundation of everything he cared about, not just good communication, not just effective leadership, not just the ability to win friends and influence people in the practical results-oriented sense that the title of his most famous book might suggest, but genuine human connection. The real thing, the kind that does not happen in the performance of social skill, but in the moments of authentic presence, the moments where two human beings actually meet each other, not their curated versions, not their professional presentations, not their carefully managed impressions, but each other, fully, honestly, with all the vulnerability and imperfection and quiet desperation and surprising grace that real human beings carry. Those moments do not happen by accident. They happen because someone in the encounter chose to create the conditions for them, chose stillness over performance, chose listening over speaking, chose understanding over impression management, chose to be genuinely, fully, unhurriedly present for another human being in a world that is moving too fast for most people to be present for anything. That choice, made consistently, made deliberately, made as a practice and a discipline, and ultimately as a way of being in the world, is what Carnegie was pointing to from the very beginning. Not a technique for the boardroom, not a strategy for the negotiating table, not a method for making people like you or trust you or follow you, though all of those things follow naturally from the practice. A way of honoring the people around you, a way of saying to every quality of your attention and your presence, something that most people never say clearly enough in words. You matter to me. Your inner world is worth my full attention. I am not here to perform for you, or impress you, or extract something from you. I am here to understand you, and in understanding you, to offer you something that the noise and speed and relentless surface level busyness of modern life almost never offers. The experience of being truly heard. Carnegie told his students in the final sessions of his courses that if they took nothing else from everything he had taught them, if they forgot the principles and the techniques and the specific strategies and all the rest of it, he wanted them to carry one thing, one practice, simple enough to begin today, powerful enough to transform every relationship, every encounter, every room they ever walked into for the rest of their lives. Before you speak, listen, not as a tactical delay, not as a strategic pause, designed to make your eventual contribution more impactful, though it will be, but as a genuine act of respect for the human being in front of you, as an acknowledgement that their experience of the world is as complex and as valid and as worthy of serious attention as your own, as a choice to honor the invisible richness of every person you encounter, rather than processing them as backdrop to your own story. That is the practice. That is the discipline. That is the hidden power of the person who never speaks first. Not silence for its own sake, but silence in service of something far greater than anything words spoken too soon could ever achieve. In service of understanding, of connection, of the rare and extraordinary and quietly revolutionary experience of two human beings actually meeting each other in the full complexity of who they are. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest, not the most prepared, not the most aggressive or the most confident or the most impressively credentialed. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who understands it completely, and understanding, real understanding, the kind that changes outcomes and transforms relationships and leaves people feeling, long after the encounter is over, that something important happened, always begins in silence, always begins with a willingness to listen before you speak, always begins with a choice that Carnegie made and Franklin made and Lincoln made and every genuinely great communicator in human history made, the choice to understand first and let everything else follow from that. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest or the most prepared. It is the one who understood everything before they said a word,